There is a hidden current in the unconscious that binds the empath and the narcissist in a dance older than language itself. This entanglement is not merely relational, it is archetypal. It rises from the depths of the psyche like a forgotten dream, demanding not resolution, but revelation. Why does the empath, one who gives without reserve, find themselves repeatedly tethered to the one who takes without end? Why does suffering return like the tide, each wave carrying the salt of the same wound? The answer lies not in surface behavior, but in the subterranean architecture of the soul. The empath is not born in softness, they are forged in chaos. Their gift, often praised as sensitivity, is in fact a survival mechanism, an exquisite attunement to the moods, needs, and potential wrath of others. From early life, the empath learns to extend their antennae outward to scan the emotional landscape for disturbance. This outward focus is a form of psychic exile. They abandon the self in order to remain safe. But this exile carves a wound, a hollowing of the inner being. And it is this wound, this lack, that becomes the unspoken invitation to the narcissist. The narcissist, in contrast, is hollow but unaware. Their persona is grandiose, inflated, but beneath the surface lies a withered self, fragmented and hungry. They seek reflection. They do not seek love. Though they name it so, they seek worship, confirmation of their illusion. The empath offers this worship unconsciously, not because they are weak, but because they are compelled by an inner child who still hopes that if they give enough, they will finally be seen. This meeting is not coincidence, it is constellation. The narcissist plays the role of the devouring god, and the empath, the sacrificial lamb. Yet, within the archetypal field, both are prisoners of a deeper psychic myth. The empath is not innocent, nor is the narcissist solely the predator. Each carries a shadow. The empath's shadow is rage, hidden beneath layers of spiritual bypassing and martyrdom. The narcissist's shadow is shame, buried so deeply that it must be projected onto others to be survived. Thus, they find each other two fragments of a broken mirror, reflecting only the pain they are unwilling to claim as their own. But this is not a death sentence. It is a summons. The encounter between empath and narcissist is often the spark that initiates the journey of individuation. The empath must confront their addiction to merging, their fear of boundaries, their unconscious belief that love requires sacrifice. The narcissist, should they awaken, must confront the unbearable truth of their emptiness and grieve the loss of the self they never developed. Dreams reveal this truth in symbolic form. I recall a woman who dreamt of a house filled with mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of her. In the dream, she walked from room to room, desperate to find one mirror that showed her true face. But each mirror held only distortion. Some made her small, others monstrous. Finally, she found a mirror with no reflection at all. And she wept. That was the beginning of her healing, not in the finding, but in the absence. The true self cannot be seen through others' eyes. It must be excavated from the depths The empath seeks love, but they often settle for recognition. They confuse being needed with being loved. This is the wound of the anima in distortion, the feminine principle, not as generative and magnetic, but as overreaching, overgiving, lost in the chaos of others. When the anima is unintegrated, she manifests as the over-functioning mother, the self-sacrificing lover, the intuitive, who bleeds for the world but neglects her own body. And it is this distortion that the narcissist exploits, not always consciously, but always inevitably, for the narcissist is drawn to light, but they cannot metabolize it. They feed, and they feed, but they are never nourished. Yet, and this is vital, we must not pathologize one and glorify the other. The empaths must see how they too participate in the cycle of unconscious feeding. They feed on being needed. They fear their own autonomy. They fear solitude, for it would demand an encounter with the abandoned inner self, and so they give, and in this giving they disappear. The narcissist does not erase them, they erase themselves, in hopes of finally being loved enough to exist. What a cruel paradox, to be loved for not existing, but the psyche does not tolerate this dismemberment forever. The self, the totality of the psyche, begins to rebel. Symptoms emerge: depression, anxiety, psychosomatic illness. These are not pathologies, but messages. The soul whispers first, then it screams. The empath begins to feel exhaustion that sleep cannot cure, loneliness that companionship cannot soothe. They begin to question, why do I always feel empty after giving? This is the crack in the shell. Through that crack, the light of the unconscious pours in, and often this is when the dreamscape becomes active again. Dreams of wolf, of drowning, of betrayal, dreams that terrify, because they reveal, in one such dream from a patient, the dreamer stood in a field of mirrors, shattered into shards. Each shard held an eye, her own eye, watching her. She realized she had scattered her soul into others, and now they watched, waiting to be reclaimed. That is the work-soul retrieval. The empath must gather the projections, call back the parts of themselves they gave away. Not because they were stolen, but because they offered them without terms. That offering was not generosity, it was survival. And what of the narcissist? Often they remain unchanged, for change would require the collapse of their false self, but sometimes, rarely, they too awaken, often through loss. The supply leaves, the audience turns away, their charm fades, and in the silence, the shame returns. If they can endure that shame without fleeing into further illusion, a doorway opens. They may begin their own descent, their own confrontation with the shadow. But this requires courage. Most cannot summon, because unlike the empath, who is too open, the narcissist is sealed shut by terror. They must die to who they believe they are before they can be reborn. This is the mystery of the psychic crucifixion. The empath is nailed to the cross of their own over-identification with the savior archetype. They bleed, but believe the bleeding is holy. It is not. It is addiction. It is the child still trying to earn the love of a wounded parent by becoming what that parent needed. And so the narcissist plays the role of the parent, the tyrant, the God who demands sacrifice. But the true self, the divine center, demands no sacrifice. It demands authenticity, integration, truth. What must be sacrificed is the lie. When the empath finally turns inward, they will find the abandoned child sitting in the shadow, holding a bowl of light. That light is not meant to be given away. It is meant to guide the self home. But it can only be carried by one who knows their own hands, their own feet, their own heartbeat. Boundaries then are not walls, they are altars. Places where the self can commune with itself, uninterrupted. The empath must build these altars. They must let others go hungry, rather than bleed out to feed them. This is not cruelty. This is healing. The alchemical fire begins here. The empath reclaims their projection of the divine onto others and pulls it inward. They stop seeking the sacred in the narcissist's eyes. They stop waiting to be chosen. They choose themselves. And in that choice, something ancient shifts. The pattern breaks. The wheel stops turning. And in the silence that follows, the soul begins to sing again. You see, the empath and the narcissist are not enemies, they are mirrors. But one must step away from the mirror to become whole. One must cease trying to heal others and instead descend into the underworld of their own being. That descent is terrifying. It requires the death of identity, the unraveling of all that was once called good. But beneath the false light of the persona lies the true light of the self. And that light does not blind, it warms, it does not devour, it nourishes. The myth of Echo and Narcissus teaches us much here. Echo, cursed to only repeat the words of others, fades into nothingness. Narcissus, in love with his own reflection, drowns. But what if Echo had turned from Narcissus? What if she had reclaimed her voice? What if, instead of echoing another's hunger, she had sung her own song? This is the task before you, not to fix the narcissist, not to prove your worth, but to return to the source, the wellspring of your own being, and drink deeply. Let the others first. Let the mirror crack. Let the silence rise. Only then will you hear the voice that has always been yours. You cannot heal the wound by dressing it in virtue. The empath often cloaks their compulsion in words like kindness, compassion, and unconditional love. But these are sometimes merely disguises for fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of being unseen. Fear that if they were to stop giving, the world would stop turning. And this fear is not trivial, it is ancestral, it is mythic. It is the fear of the child god exiled from Olympus, cast into the valley without a name, tasked with keeping the heavens alive through sacrifice. But the heavens do not ask for your life. The gods do not demand your bleeding. They ask for presence, for consciousness, for integration. And you, dear empath, must awaken from the trance that says your value is measured by how much pain you endure. It is a trance, a spell cast by centuries of distorted archetypes. The wounded healer, the selfless saint, the spiritual martyr, these are not complete images, they are fragments. Archetypes severed from their wholeness become addictions. The true healer is not one who dies for the world, but one who has died to illusion and returned with the medicine of truth. The true saint is not one who disappears, but one who embodies the divine flame without burning themselves to ash. So how do we begin to untangle this ancient knot? We must walk backward through the dream corridors of our psyche. Back to the first moment, we decided it was safer to disappear. Was it the angry parent whose love was contingent on performance? Was it the chaotic home that required you to become a seer just to survive? Was it the trauma that taught you your body was not your own? The origin matters not as a confession, but as a map to the fragmented self. This is not analysis for its own sake. It is not a forensic dissection of the soul. It is a pilgrimage. You are not meant to remain in the ruins. You are meant to rebuild, but you must first touch the rubble. The empath must become an archaeologist of their own emotional history. Each broken shard unearthed is not shame, it is a signpost. Every place you gave too much, every silence you mistook for peace, every relationship that left you hollow, these are the bones of your forgotten godhood. You see, the narcissist was never the prize. They were the test, a test of whether you would continue to trade your truth for connection, a test of whether you would confuse being seen with being known, a test of whether you would abandon yourself in the name of unity. And most of us fail the test again and again. Not because we are weak, but because we are asleep, hypnotized by the desire to be chosen, haunted by the belief that love must be earned. But the self, the divine center of the psyche, cannot be earned. It is not a trophy, it is a birthright. Let me tell you a story. A man came to me once, exhausted, hollow-eyed, confused. He said he kept falling in love with women who needed saving, women who were radiant at first, but over time became cold, distant, cruel. He said he tried everything, gifts, words, self-help books, but each time he ended up shattered, discarded. He believed he was cursed. That love was punishment. But as we explored, a dream came. In the dream, he was in a cathedral, offering bread to a statue. The statue wept but did not move. He kept feeding it until he collapsed. At that moment, the statue came alive, not to embrace him, but to whisper, "I never asked for this." He awoke in tears. The dream was clear. He had made a god of his own wound. He had projected his longing onto others, hoping they would transform and return his sacrifice with affection. But the statue cannot love. It only reflects. The narcissist, in this sense, is a statue built of stone, adorned with illusions, unmoved by the depth of your offering. And if you stay too long, you begin to forget your own name. You become the worshipper, the priest, the supplicant, never the beloved. The spiritual task then is iconoclasm, to break the false idol, to stop pouring wine into a mouth that cannot drink. This is terrifying, because once the idol falls, the silence returns. And in that silence, the voice of the soul, faint and forgotten, begins to call your name. It is not the narcissist who must change. It is you who must awaken. This awakening is not a moment. It is a crucible You will feel grief, rage, emptiness. You will want to return, to fix, to try again. But healing is not repetition. It is rupture. You must rupture the cycle that says love is earned through diminishment. You must rupture the belief that compassion requires betrayal of the self. You must rupture the archetype of the bleeding empath and allow a new image to emerge, the sovereign soul. The sovereign soul does not give to be loved. They give because they are love. They do not merge to avoid pain. They merge because they have first become whole. They do not rescue others from their shadows. They stand in their own light and allow others to choose the same. And when the sovereign soul meets the narcissist, they do not collapse. They see the mask. They see the hunger. They feel the pull, but they do not move. Not out of judgment, but out of clarity. They no longer confuse empathy with enmeshment. They no longer confuse intuition with obligation. They no longer confuse pain with purpose. This is the evolution of the empath. It is not to stop feeling. It is to feel with discernment. It is not to stop giving. It is to give from overflow, not depletion. It is not to stop loving. It is to love oneself so completely that only those who do the same can stay. The narcissist may return. They often do, but where once you would have welcomed them with open arms and open wounds, you now meet them with stillness. You no longer try to explain your worth. You no longer contort to fit their fantasy. You no longer offer your light as food. You have become your own sun. And the sun does not beg to be seen. The work is not easy. You will relapse. You will doubt. You will miss the highs, the intoxication of being idealized. But those highs were counterfeit. They cost you your essence. Now, you are forging something real, something sacred. And that sacredness is not flashy. It is quiet, subtle, a steady beat of your own heart that no longer races at someone else's pace. And as you go, you will see the world differently. You will recognize the empath still asleep, still bleeding for love. You will want to shake them, to warn them, but you must not. That is the final test, to honor another's journey without interruption, to trust that each soul must awaken in their own time. You can be a mirror, but not a savior, a lighthouse, not a lifeboat. Your power lies not in who you can change. It lies in who you have become. And as that truth settles into your bones, something miraculous begins to happen. The dream shifts where once there were mirrors showing only distortion. You now see windows open, wide, with sunlight pouring through. Where once the house was haunted by fragments of self, now it is inhabited, alive, whole. You return to the cathedral, but this time there is no statue, only you. And you are not offering bread, you are breaking it and sharing it, not because you must, but because you can. Not because you lack, but because you overflow. This is the return of the divine feminine within the empath, no longer the bleeding mother, but the wise priestess, no longer the broken child seeking repair, but the awakened soul who remembers. And in this remembrance, you do not fight the narcissist. You no longer need to, because now you see them for what they are. and you choose to stay home within yourself, where the true beloved has been waiting all along, there comes a moment, sudden yet ancient, when the empath no longer sees themselves as the victim of the narcissist, but as a participant in an archetypal ritual, one whose meaning had been concealed beneath the veil of sentimentality. In this moment, the narrative fractures. The story you told yourself that you were merely unfortunate, simply too kind, too soft-hearted, begins to unravel, and what lies beneath is far more sobering, a complex system of unconscious contracts, shadow pacts, and soul entanglements you entered into without knowing. What is an unconscious contract? It is the vow you made as a child to always keep the peace, even if it meant shattering your own sense of truth. It is the belief that if you suffer enough, perhaps those around you will finally feel joy. It is deep ancestral programming that says your feelings are dangerous and your needs are burdensome. These contracts are not written in ink, but in silence, in what was never said, in what was consistently denied, and the narcissist, they are magnetized to such contracts like moths to a flame. But this flame is not love. It is availability, energetic availability, psychic permeability. An empath, in their wounded state, is an open system. No boundaries, no filters, no inner gatekeeper. They absorb, reflect, and reshape themselves according to the emotional temperature of the room. It is this mutability that the narcissist exploits, again, not always consciously, but as a reflex, like a starving man who stumbles upon a feast. They do not ask whether the food belongs to someone else. They simply devour, but the moment of awakening begins when the empath stops identifying with the feast and begins to ask, why have I placed my soul on this altar again? It is here that the shadow speaks. Yes, even the empath has a shadow. And this shadow is often more dangerous because it is hidden behind the illusion of goodness. What is this shadow? It is the part of you that enjoys being indispensable, that feels superior in your sacrifice, that wears the cloak of martyrdom because it avoids the harder truth that you are terrified of being alone. The narcissist triggers this shadow perfectly. Their dependence on your light becomes your purpose. Their instability gives you identity. Their drama becomes your rhythm. This is not love. This is bondage. And the key to freedom lies in reclaiming the projections you have cast onto the narcissist. You must ask, what part of me did I give to them? My power, my voice, my divine inner masculine who sets limits and says no more. Did I place my worth into their hands? And then weep when they dropped it. You see, the narcissist is not only an abuser, they are a teacher, a terrible teacher, but a teacher nonetheless. They bring to the surface every unhealed wound, every unspoken fear, every inherited belief that says, you must earn your existence. They amplify your shadow so that you may see it. And though they do so through distortion and cruelty, their presence creates the conditions for transformation if and only if you choose to do the inner work. Let us speak now of boundaries not as rules, but as symbols. A boundary is not a wall to keep others out. It is a symbol of the self's recognition of its own sacredness. It is the moment when the inner king or queen takes their throne and declares, This is what is mine. This is what I will no longer offer to those who will not honor it. For the empath, this reclamation is revolutionary because it undoes lifetimes, yes. Lifetimes of programming that said, your love must come without cost. Your soul must be endlessly available. But nothing sacred is without cost. Every temple has a gate. Every altar has a guardian. The narcissist, in the mythic sense, is the intruder who teaches you the necessity of becoming your own protector. They force you to choose. Will you keep bleeding in the name of love? Or will you rise in the name of truth? The journey to truth is lonely at first. The empath, having built an identity around being needed, begins to feel invisible once they establish boundaries. They are no longer the hero, no longer the savior, no longer the emotional translator for everyone's unspoken pain. But in that invisibility lies the seed of authenticity, because finally you are not being seen for what you give. You are being seen for who you are, and who you are is enough. I recall the dream of a man who had spent years entangled with a woman who praised him one moment and discarded him the next. In his dream, he stood on a cliff, holding a golden cup. Below him, the woman beckoned, surrounded by shadows, saying, pour for me. He hesitated, then a voice inside him whispered, turn the cup inward, and he drank. The sky opened. This is the image I offer you. Turn the cup inward, drink, fill yourself, and when you are full, not desperate, not hollow, you may choose to share your light, but it is a choice, not a compulsion. This act shifts the archetypal dynamic. The empath becomes the alchemist. They no longer project their sacred longing onto others, they embody it. They no longer seek love in exchange for self-erasure, they become love, radiant and whole. And this radiance no longer attracts the narcissist, for it offers no food. You are no longer their mirror. You are now the flame they cannot hold. They may try, oh yes, they may, but they will find themselves burning, exposed by a light that cannot be consumed. This is the end of the pattern, and it is also the beginning of soul. The soul does not wish for you to remain in endless cycles of suffering. The soul calls you through suffering, but it does not wish you to stay there. It is not noble to be broken forever. It is not holy to be trained. The soul asks not for martyrdom, but for maturation. And this maturation for the empath means stepping into the divine masculine within, regardless of gender. The masculine that protects, that holds, that names, that says, enough. For too long, the empath has lived in the distorted feminine fluid, formless, boundaryless. Now, the inner masculine must rise to create structure, to hold the flame without letting it be blown by every gust of another's chaos. In this union, the sacred marriage within the empath becomes whole, no longer seeking completion for another, no longer chasing redemption through giving, no longer addicted to potential. The narcissist becomes irrelevant, not as an enemy, but as a closed chapter. You turn the page and find yourself sitting there, waiting, whole at last. And now we must speak of the one thing the empath has feared all along the void. Once the narcissist is gone, once the roles are dissolved and the projection withdrawn, what remains is not immediate peace. What remains is the long echo of your own voice in an empty chamber. The identity you forged through giving, fixing, and absorbing has crumbled. You no longer orient yourself around another's chaos. You are no longer dancing to survive. And so you fall gently but deeply into a space that feels like nothing. But it is not nothing. It is sacred space. The void is not punishment. It is the womb of the self. That which is yet to be formed. The empath, having spent years, even lifetimes, orbiting around others' gravitational pull, must now become their own sun. But this becoming requires stillness. In stillness, the real is born. In stillness, you meet what is beneath your need to please. You meet the child, you meet the abandoned body, you meet the voice that was silenced so long ago you no longer knew it belonged to you. And what does that voice say? Not begin, not be strong. It says something far simpler, more primal. I am here, not for others, not for their wounds or applause or admiration, just here as being. And in this revelation, the empath begins to heal, not by doing, but by being. This is where true power is born, not the power to dominate, but the power to remain grounded when others spiral, to remain silent when others provoke, to remain soft without collapsing. The narcissist loses all power over the one who no longer needs to be needed. The dynamic collapses when you stop giving from lack and begin holding your center. They may still perform their charm, still try to provoke the old pattern, but the hook is gone. You do not bite because there is no longer a wound to bait. This is not detachment, it is wholeness. And wholeness is magnetic, but it does not attract chaos. It repels it. It does not soothe the unhealed. It exposes them. The narcissist cannot remain in the presence of someone who sees through the illusion. They will flee as shadows do when the candle is lit. This is what makes the healed empath so radiant. They are no longer just a feeling being. They are a sovereign being, whole in their yin and yang, rooted in soul and spine, capable of compassion with clarity, capable of intimacy without enmeshment, capable of love that does not demand self-destruction. In the language of the psyche, this is individuation, not perfection, but integration. The empath has pulled back their projections. They have ceased chasing their own soul in the body of another. They have turned finally toward themselves. The journey that began in pain ends in presence. Let me tell you of a dream. A woman stood in a garden made of mirrors. Each plant, each tree, even the sky above, reflected her back to herself. At first, she panicked. Was this vanity? Was this self-obsession? But then she noticed something strange. In each reflection, she looked slightly different, not younger or older, but more whole. Each step she took, the mirrors shimmered, revealing new colors. She touched a rose, and it turned into flame but did not burn her. She heard laughter her own and wept. This is the final stage of transformation. You become the garden You no longer seek refuge in another's gaze. You become the sanctuary you used to beg for. And now, what of the world? What of relationships? They do not end, but they change. Radically, you no longer seek the spark of potential. You seek the fire of embodiment. You are not lured by intensity. You seek resonance. You do not fall for promises, you are tuned to energy. And above all, you are no longer afraid to walk away, not from punishment, but from preservation. You choose your peace over their chaos. You choose your body over their projection. You choose your voice over their silence. You choose yourself again and again. And in this choosing, something holy emerges, not from religion, but from the sacred unconscious. You become what the mystics spoke of, a vessel of divine love that needs no audience, a chalice of truth that pours when ready, a soul that no longer dances for crumbs, but sings its own name. This is the Jungian task. The psychological becomes spiritual. The personal becomes archetypal. Your healing echoes through lineages, through generations, through realms, because in breaking the pattern, you did not just save yourself. You ended an entire bloodline of forgetting. You remembered who you were before the first wound, before the first projection, before the world taught you to disappear. And that remembering, that is the most dangerous thing of all, because a soul that remembers itself is a soul that cannot be controlled. And the narcissist who thrives on control can no longer find a home in you. You are no longer a mirror. You are now the sky, boundless, unreflected, real. So now I ask you, not as a psychologist, but as a mystic, are you willing to be alone long enough to meet yourself? Are you willing to feel the ache of absence so you may uncover the presence that was buried beneath years of false devotion? Are you willing to stop saving others and start sanctifying yourself? If so, your journey is only beginning, and the next time the narcissist comes, you will not tremble, you will not chase, you will not plead, you will smile gently, powerfully, and walk away, not in hatred, but in liberation. And as you walk, the chains will fall behind you, one by one, until there is only silence. And in that silence, you, your voice, your breath, your light, your God, at last